Topic 5.12 is about sustainability. And, as I say, ABS, always be sustainable. And sustainability is a concept in which the human use of natural resources is balanced without depletion for future generations. Sustainability is a very complex topic, and there is environmental sustainability and economic social sustainability and social sustainability. We're generally focused here on environmental sustainability. And so when we think about sustainability, it requires sort of an awareness of many different aspects to understand whether or not a person, a place, a community is living sustainably, or whether the use of certain resources is sustainable. And so it requires an awareness of things like biodiversity, food production, climate change, atmospheric pollution, human population, the depletion of resources. Sort of all concepts that we're talking about in this course relate back to this concept of sustainability. And one term that we might have you may not be familiar with, this concept of an externality, a negative externality. Negative externalities are costs of some product or behavior where the cost is not fully of the impacts of this behavior or this good is not actually included in the price. We can use as an example to explain negative externalities. Think about driving. Like, there are certain clear costs to driving a car, right? The cost for insurance, the cost to purchase or lease the car, the cost for gasoline, the cost for maintenance. Those are all things that we can factor in when we think about driving. But there are also a whole host of things related to driving that are not factored into the actual cost of the user, of the person driving. The effects of driving on climate change, right? The CO2 production from driving an internal combustion engine. The impacts to health from the air pollution results from combustion of gasoline. Accidents on the highway, injuries, the loss of time due to being congested and stuck in a traffic. These are all real costs that are associated with driving, but they're not included in the cost of gasoline when you go to the pump. You as an individual, if you drive more and are contributing more to these external costs, you don't bear any of that cost, but they're borne more widely on society as a whole. So this concept is called a negative externality. And sometimes individuals that are trying to build more sustainable models, economic models, try to price in some of these negative externalities into the cost of the actual activity. So what that would mean would say, okay, well, we take the health impacts due to the pollution from cars and figure out what that means per mile, and that's added in to the cost that you're going to pay driving. So these negative, and if that is done, some people would argue that if you build in that cost of these negative externalities, that's going to make them more expensive and therefore maybe reduce that behavior, reduce the amount of driving. So it may incentivize people to take more sustainable action in their everyday lives. An example of sustainability is using resources for human uses, but in a manner that is sustainable. When we think about resource use for like this, for example, taking wooded products from the forest, fishing from the oceans. These are resources that are available to humans, and they can be used, but they can be used in a sustainable way. We can extract lumber from the forest without actually depleting that resource. Same for fishing. And one concept that's related to this is sustainable yield. Sustainable yield is the amount of a resource, a renewable resource, that can be used without actually reducing the available supply. So if we look at this graph of fishing, if we see sort of the effort, the number of boats that are fishing per day, and on the y-axis here, we have the catch, how much of the fish are being caught. We have a graph, and the graphs take this shape where if we are catching, okay, below the amount that's sustainable, we call that underutilization. If we are taking more of this product than can be sustained, that would be overfishing. That's going to decrease the population. And if we are taking at the peak of this graph, that means we're taking as much fish as we can while still having a sustainable resource going forward. That's what we call the optimal yield. Going beyond that is going to deplete the resource. Going less than that is going to leave that resource underutilized. And the same can be thought of in forest products. You can harvest certain numbers of trees using selective cutting, and it's not going to deplete the forest resource, versus a clear cutting of an area is going to deplete those. So we want to try to use resources around this maximum sustainable yield to maximize resource use while still not depleting the resource.